Good morning, everybody. Sorry we cannot have the shiur like we normally have, but we'll try to have the shiur this way. We are starting a new book, Vayikra, and this book, a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it looks like boring, but it is not boring at all. People like to talk about Bereshit, Shmot, Bamidbar, Dvarim, a lot of stories, very interesting. And Vayikra is talking about sacrifices and the job of the Kohanim. And the truth is that it is very, very interesting and a lot of things to talk about. And from the beginning we see it. Vayikra, the Aleph is small. Why is the Aleph small? But before we go into the Aleph, which is small, let's see another interesting thing. At the end of the last Parsha, we see that building the Mishkan, and then Moshe Rabbeinu cannot go in because the Holy Spirit fills up the whole Mishkan. But in our Parsha, Vayikra, Kodesh Baruch Hu calls him himself to go in. So the question is, why is the book of Shmot ending in this way? Why isn't it ending with a nicer way, like we see that Moshe Rabbeinu is going in? Moshe Rabbeinu, this great guy, Sefer Shmot is ending that he cannot go into the Mishkan, the thing that he gave his life for. But we see in our Parsha, not only is going in, he's being called personally by God to come. So what's the reason that we stop the book of Shmot at the ending like this? And the truth is that this is exactly the point and the difference between us and all the other religions. We believe in God and only God. There is nobody else. In other words, even Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the greatest guy of all, Lokam B'Yisrael ke Moshe Or, there was nobody in Am Yisrael like Moshe. He, at the end of the day, he is a human being, flesh and blood. And the Torah wants to show us that even Moshe Rabbeinu, with all his greatness, that God talks through him, he cannot go into the Mishkan. To show us that a human being is a human being and doesn't matter what level he is. From the other side, this is the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayikra, the Aleph is small because Moshe Rabbeinu was very humble. He didn't want everybody to see that God really calls him directly only to him. So he did the Aleph small. So it's Vayikra. Vayikra is like, by mikre. It's a mikre. It's on the way God called him, not specially to him. And this is, by the way, the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu is called Moshe and not other names. He's got a few other names, which we're not going to go into it now. And the question is, why is he called Moshe Rabbeinu Dafka? Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the name that who gave him? The daughter of Pharaoh. She gave him this name. And this is to show us a very interesting point, because, sorry to say, what? Moshe Rabbeinu was the only humble guy in the Bible? Aaron was not humble? We see in Parashat Aman, when Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to Am Yisrael, and he says, "V'nachnu ma," and it's together with Aaron. Together it says, "We are nothing." So we see that also Aaron is humble. And sorry, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they were not humble. So what is so special about the humbleness of Moshe Rabbeinu? And that's exactly the point. To be humble from a point of view of greatness, this is being humble. In other words, when we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu was raised in the palace of Pharaoh. Now thinking about this, we're talking about a guy that had all the good of this world in his hand. He was on top of the world. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, each one of them had certain problems. And Aaron, he was living with Am Yisrael in the Galut, when they were being slaved in Egypt, while Moshe Rabbeinu is raising up in a palace. He is on top of the world. And with all of this, he is humble. So humbleness is, first of all, from greatness. Because somebody who's got nothing, so what does it mean being humble? It means nothing. Somebody is poor, somebody is stupid. Humble? It's nothing. But somebody who is very clever, very rich, on control on things, and he is humble, that's humbleness. From the other side, You have to understand, humbleness doesn't mean that I'm not going to talk, I'm not going to do things. On the contrary, you have to do things. You have to do a lot of things. You have to be on top of things. And you have to show everybody that, yes, you know, but everything from the point of view of humbleness. There was no greater guy than Moshe Rabbeinu. From one side. From the other side, he was the most humble guy. Because it's like when we come to all the great people of Am Yisrael, all the Gdoilim. They are so Gdoilim, and you see them, for example, seeing Reb Chaim Kanievsky talking with a little kid. Like, this little kid is his friend. Like, this little kid is on his level. Asking a question, answering in such a beautiful way. That's humbleness. So this is what we talk when we want to understand who is this leader, which is called Moshe Rabbeinu. In how much we have to learn from this leader, from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, this whole book is talking about sacrifices. What is a sacrifice? What's the meaning of a sacrifice? What's the idea behind the sacrifice? Is it really the idea that I'm taking an animal and slaughtering it and burning it on the altar? That's the idea of the korban? From the outside, maybe. But it's got an inside meaning. And the inside meaning of a korban, of a sacrifice, is to sacrifice the beastly part that I've got inside me. A behemah is the side or the level of the beastly side of me, of desires and all the other stuff that leads me to places where the body wants, but not the soul. And the idea is to the soul, to control the body. And in order to do this, I have to sacrifice my beastly part. All the desires I've got, all those things that I'm doing. This is a sacrifice. So the idea of a sacrifice is להקריב בהמה, to sacrifice the behemiyut, to sacrifice the beastly side that I've got inside me, and elevate myself to a higher level. In order to do this, I have to bring a sacrifice. The sacrifice is, by the way, done from the goodness of my heart. Because you can give a sacrifice, and you can give a sacrifice. But it's written in Torah, reach nichoach laHashem. It will smell good. What does a smelling good mean? For example, when we're talking about smelling good, when you are very hungry, and you go near a restaurant, and you've got this unbelievable smell, and you want to eat, but it is inside. You cannot go in, or you haven't got the money to eat. So the smell means nothing to you. On the contrary, it starts aggravating you because you cannot eat what this smell represents. Coming home after work, very angry, and you get home and you smell the things that your wife cooked for you. But you know that when you open the door, you will find all those good things on the table and you can eat it. That's reach nichoach. That's the idea of reach nichoach. That's the smell that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to smell. He doesn't want to smell something that's got no meaning. In other words, to say I believe and do nothing about it doesn't mean anything. The smell has to be the first part of what I'm going to do. In other words, the smell of what good I'm going to do next. That's the idea of being a korban. When I sacrifice the beastly part of me, I'm expected to do good. Not only to bring the sacrifice, that's not enough. What am I going to do afterwards? And talking about sacrifices, what is sacrifice? So this morning I was talking about a very interesting point. We have the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, the 36 Tzadikim. So people think that those Tzadikim are hidden somewhere and suffering and learning the whole day, not eating, not sleeping. Wrong. Those Lamed Vav Tzadikim, they're everywhere. They can be everybody. And on the contrary, sometimes those Lamed Vav Tzadikim, they come from the greatest sin. For example, talking about sacrifices. When a tzaddik brings a sacrifice to God, thanking God or whatever it is, he comes happily and is proud. But when a sinner comes to bring a sacrifice about the sin he did, how does he do this? He doesn't do it happily because he is ashamed of what he did. But with all those things, he comes and brings a sacrifice. So whose sacrifice is greater? The sacrifice of the tzaddik that comes happy, or the sacrifice of the guy that is ashamed, but with all his shame, he's still doing it? And that's being a part of Lamed Vav Tzaddik. The Gemara says that blessed are those, for example, a bachelor who lives in a big town and doesn't do any sin. He's tempted and everything, but he doesn't do anything. Or The other example is somebody who is very rich and he gives the master